Hello, welcome to the Exploring Revelation podcast. My name is Colt Robinson, and I am the pastor of Bethel Church in Yale, South Dakota. And I just want to welcome you to this podcast, this video where we're going to explore the book of Revelation together. I've been wanting to study the book of Revelation for a long time now. And to be honest, I've wanted to do that in our church community because I think many would find it interesting. And also, there's been a number of people that have asked to go through it. I do find this stuff fascinating, but to be honest, I've taken a really kind of an extended break away from taking a hard look at the book. I got into it seriously in Bible college, and then in seminary. That fascination continued. A large portion of my master's thesis was devoted to the interpretation of the book of Revelation. And after spending so much time on my thesis back then, I've really turned my attention to other things. I don't want to be one of those guys that seems to always be on the same soapbox. And I know people that are so taken up with Bible prophecy or the role of Israel, the two are very related, that they let that shape their understanding of Scripture and everything. And it seems like everything seems to go back to the rapture or the whatever. And I want to let my understanding of Scripture shape these other things. You know, I guess that's where I want to be. I want to understand the Scriptures and then let the Scriptures inform my understanding of these things that might not be quite as clear, or these things that might be difficult to understand. Having said that, I want to walk through the book, and how we're going to do that is through video. If you'll be able to access this video through video podcasts where you can check out the audio, the video, there'll be an interactive event set up. So that's the hope anyways. For sure, we're going to put it out through video podcast, and the goal is that each episode isn't going to be very long. It's just going to be a short synopsis of what we're talking about. How exactly the length there is going to be, I'm not sure. We'll see how today goes. But before we get into the book itself, we need to get into some preliminary things, right? Some of these things we would do with any book that we look at, the author, the audience, those things. But the book of Revelation does pose some unique obstacles, maybe is how we should put that. Notice that I said the book of Revelation, not Revelations. The word is singular. It's the revelation of Jesus Christ. We'll probably say more about that at some point. But for now, we want to spend a few moments talking about the uniqueness and the difficulty of this book. You know, I said one of the things, and this is one of the areas that we need to spend a little more time on, and this is why, because this book is unique and it is difficult. I don't know if you've heard of a guy by the name of Ambrose Bierce. He was a poet and a journalist. He was a Civil War veteran. He wrote a book that is called The Devil's Dictionary, and it's named one of the 100 greatest masterpieces in American history. The book is a satirical dictionary where he would give words and then give humorous and satirical definitions. And he would do this, right, to make a point about each word. And the reason that it's considered humor is that it contains or helps one understand truth. Kind of like a Civil War era version of the Babylon Bee, I would reckon. In this book, Bierce defined Revelation as a famous book in which St. John concealed all that he knew. The revealing, then, according to Bierce, is done by the commentators who know absolutely nothing. They're just guessing. And if you've ever read the book, it's difficult to understand the book, and then you read a commentary or you hear a sermon, and it seems like, oh yeah, they're making sense of it. But then you read another commentary or hear another sermon, and you recognize that it's almost like there's about as many interpretations as there are people commenting on it. And I think that was Bierce's point. I find it interesting that this was Ambrose Bierce's take on the book of Revelation back in 1911. One person I read said that Revelation commentaries are like a black hole, and that they're so dense and that light can't even escape them. And I would say that you could probably sympathize with that to a certain degree. The book of Revelation is difficult, and the reason that it's difficult or more difficult in some respects is that it's difficult than other books in the New Testament is that it's unique, it's different. The fact is, the book of Revelation is unique from the other books in the New Testament. But not only that, it's written in such a way that really isn't familiar to most people today. I think this has a twofold effect on people, right? One, people find it fanciful, that it's so different that they're drawn to the mystery. And for instance, ask any pastor, and they're going to tell you about how new converts are often drawn to the book for some reason. It just isn't well-educated people that want to know more and understand the deep things of the scriptures. But new believers probe our desire to probe the mysteries within this book. Perhaps you can relate to that, right? Perhaps you remember when you were a new believer and you were drawn to the book of Revelation, or perhaps you are a new believer, and that's why you're listening to this podcast. The second effect that the uniqueness and difficulty of the book have on people is that they tend to shy away from it. So the opposite effect, right? Some are drawn to it, some are push it away because it's just too hard to understand. They dismiss it. They suffice it to say, when it comes to the book, we know who wins in the end, right? That's the point. We know who wins. Why get all this other stuff? We know it's all gonna pan out in the end. So why know the order? I guess what I want to point out here is that there's a great irony that exists, and that is that the revelation, the word revelation in the Greek is the word apocalyptis, and the word literally means an uncovering or an unveiling. So the idea is clearing or to uncover something, not to conceal it. Of course, that's part of the challenge in understanding the book. And we're going to talk about that quite a bit as we go through the book. And that is that the style that it is written isn't familiar to us. It's what is called apocalyptic literature. Apocalyptic literature was actually a popular style of writing for about 400 years, around the time in which the book of Revelation was written, 200 BC to 200 AD. It was written in this kind of literature. This would have been well known to the Christian or to the Jew that was living during this time. Apocalyptic literature uses very symbolic and figurative language, often written during the times of persecution, depicting conflict between good and evil. The book of Revelation isn't the only place in the Bible that uses this type of literature, apocalyptic literature. There are portions of Ezekiel, Daniel, Zechariah in the Old Testament. For instance, in the New Testament, we find it in Revelation, of course, but we also see apocalyptic elements in Matthew 24. For us, the book of Revelation is very unique, and because of that, it's difficult to understand. But we also need to keep in mind that for the early church, they didn't have the same difficulty in understanding it as we do, because the style wasn't unique to them. they were living in a time in which the symbols of the book that make us scratch our heads were likely familiar to them, like an elephant and a donkey to us. I would go as so far to say that the book was meant to be understood. And it wasn't just meant to be understood by the intellectual elite, but it was meant to be understood in a casual hearing. The third verse of the book of chapter 1, I think makes this clear. Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear and who keep what is written in it, for the time is near. Notice that the author doesn't say, blessed is the one who reads, even though they do not understand. It says, blessed is the one who reads, who hears, and lives out the truths contained in it. That strongly implies that the book is meant to be understood, doesn't it? Of course, this is the goal of our study, right? Not only to read it, but to hear it, to benefit from it, to learn from it, to do the things that it says. So I'll say one more thing here in closing, and that is that once we realize that this book was meant to be understood, and that the Christians at the time in which it was written would have been familiar with this type of literature, they would have been able to understand it, then we also realize that much of the material that is put out today about the book of Revelation, and there is a lot of it, is to a very large extent worthless. Many approach the book as something that only the spiritually elite can grasp. But not only that, they approach it as somebody that could only live in our time could understand, because much of it speaks to the events that are related to us. You know, you read the book of Revelation in one hand and the newspaper in the other, so to speak. You know, that kind of thinking says that the book was never meant to be understood rightly by those that first read it, by those that lived at the time of John's writing. There's not a question about the uniqueness and the difficulty of the book in our context. You know, prime that with a great fascination with concerning the mystery of it. And it sets a great stage where all these would-be prophecy experts would come out and give people what they desire. But when we approach the book from the perspective that those who were reading it during the time it was written made sense of it, then that changes our perspective and how we approach the book, doesn't it? And how we seek to understand the book. So thanks for listening to the Exploring Revelation podcast. If you have questions or comments about what you've heard, you can head over to our church website, bethelmbchurch.org, click on the Connect tab and leave a question or comment there. We would be glad to hear from you and just looking forward to as we explore the book of Revelation together. And just think about this as we continue on in our conversation about the book of Revelation, and as you go throughout the week, just consider all of the material that is out there, and say, with this understanding of the book, would have the people that at the time in which it was written, in the first century, would have they really been able to comprehend or understand, or would they have to know what was going on in our world today? And it really changes your perspective. That difficulty and that uniqueness shifts focus. It isn't a difficulty and uniqueness in understanding our times. It's a difficulty and uniqueness in understanding their times. So until next time, take care.